See Russ out licking doorknobs
Did you get a
downtown.
call?
Just went out there.
I
I
think
went
that-
out to Guy Point, they didn't have any.
There's a couple.
You can move in.
We have to have that to get on the ship.
At this time, I'll call the meeting of the Marshall City Council to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening. We do have an agenda before us. Are there any changes to that agenda? If not, we'll operate under that agenda. The first item then would be consider the approval of the minutes from the regular council meeting that was held on September 14th, 2021. Council does have the minutes. Are there any corrections to note?
Mr. Mayor, move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Craig to approve the minutes as they have been presented. We'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting. And the motion does pass. We'll move then to agenda item number 2, which is a public hearing on the Carr Subdivision 3, the preliminary plat. I'll call on Jason Anderson, Director of Public Works, to conduct this public hearing. And then at the conclusion of the public hearing, then we will consider the approval of the preliminary plat as well as the resolution adopting the final plat. With that, Jason?
Thank you, Mayor. Attached in the packet is the plat in question here. What we have is a developer wishing to combine and split some lots on the south side of Andrew Street in the Carr subdivision. The reason for the plat is there are lots located in Carr Subdivision 1 and Carr Subdivision 2, and the county does not allow the combination of lots that are in different subdivisions. So a plat is required. Also in the packet, you'll find the engineer's report of plat review and the final plat checklist. We've passed this around to the utilities as well for comment on easement location, and staff is recommending approval of the plat.
Okay, thank you. We'll open, if there's any questions or input as part of the public hearing from either the audience or the council. This was considered by the Planning Commission. Don, any comments from the Planning Commission?
No, they approved it basically without very, very little discussion.
There's
Mayor,
no
I move we close the public hearing.
Second.
motion by Craig, seconded by Jim to close the public hearing. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting. And the motion passes. We'll now consider the approval of the preliminary plat.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by John, seconded by Russ to approve the preliminary plat. Any discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting. And the motion passes. And now we'll consider the resolution that will adopt the final plat.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Jim, seconded by Don. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting. And the motion passes. We'll move then to agenda item number 3, which is the award of bids for the Bruce Street gravel resurfacing project. We have received bids, and I'll call once again on Jason Anderson to review the bids and make the recommendation.
Thank you, Mayor. At our last council meeting, we received authorization from the council through our consent agenda item to seek quotes for the graveling of Bruce Street, the portion of it kind of known as Skunk Hollow Road, where it's more of a gravel surface. on the north end of town. We received 5 quotes for that gravel work. The project largely consists of placing 4 inches of gravel on top of the existing surface. There's about a quarter-mile section in what I'll call the middle area where we'll actually be removing 4 inches and placing 4 inches. That's a need to maintain the characteristics of the floodway. So we did a little study there to determine and ensure that we weren't going to be causing any flood harm downstream through raising of that elevation. So that's taken into account, and we'll be able to stake that out for our contractor. We did receive 5 quotes ranging in price from $19,951.40 up to over $35,000. The council does have a tabulation included in the packet. The low quote was provided by Rogie Excavating, Inc. in the amount of $19,951.40. The project would be funded by some funds that the city does have that were set aside when we took over that road, paid to us by Lyon County. So, and if there's any questions, I can answer them.
Questions? If not, you have the recommendation. Is there a motion?
Make a motion to award the project to Rogie Excavating.
Second.
Motion by John, seconded by Jim. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting, and the motion passes. We'll move then to the consent agenda items, and we'll bring those items up on the screen. And they include the walkways, the introduction of the ordinance, the preliminary plat of the Mosh edition, which would be the introduction of the plat and calling for the hearing, calling for a public hearing regarding proposed property tax abatement at 400 Erie Road. Consider the resolution authorizing the closure of Special Fund 215. Consider the resolution declaration of official intent regarding the reimbursements of the expenditures with proceeds of tax-exempt bonds. Consider the approval of temporary on-sale liquor license for SMSU. Consider approval of temporary on-sale intoxicating liquor license for Marshall Area Chamber of Commerce. Consider the application for exempt permit for Southwest Ducks Unlimited for an event October 15, 2021. Consider the application for exempt permit for SMSU Foundation for an event December 4th, 2021 and January 12th, 2022. Consider the request to move a dwelling. And finally, consider the approval of the bills and the project payments. Is there any item on the consent agenda any member of the council wants removed for purpose of a separate discussion?
Number 4, please.
Any other item? If not, is there a motion to approve the remaining items on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Don. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. And we'll close the voting, and the motion passes. So we'll move back then to agenda item number 4. I think there's a couple of people who are interested in having this removed. Russ, we'll start with you. This is the discussion of the walkways and the introduction of the ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a question on the ordinance, and I know we had 2 projects done in my ward in this past year. So it says the sidewalks shall be required on both sides of all streets. I mean, is that, we're not setting this in, pardon my terminology, in concrete, because on both of those projects, we only put sidewalks on one side of the street. So just a clarification on the ordinance.
So Jason, I know this was scheduled to be considered by a committee. There wasn't a quorum, so you may want to do a kind of a review of what this item is.
Sure. Thanks for the question, Councilman. I can clarify. So, this section of the ordinance is the subdivision section of the ordinance. It's largely geared towards new development in the city and just all new growth, really. So it would be setting the standard for that as those developments come forward. And that has been implemented in all new developments in modern time. This wouldn't apply to, I think I mentioned it in the L&O committee memo, which we did have a meeting today, but we didn't have a quorum. But We just feel like this sets the better standard for what we're actually doing today. When we do our engineering projects, we are proposing 5-foot sidewalk. We are at least starting with a proposal of sidewalk on both sides, and then we're working with our city council through committee and full council to make that final determination. But we do always start with the idea that it would be on both sides and it will be 5 feet in width. So this is a consistent practice, but this ordinance does specifically deal with new subdivisions. So I can clarify that.
Thank you, Jason.
Other questions?
I have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Please.
So I appreciate that, Jason, but what's to prevent somebody from coming back and saying, it's in the ordinance? Why don't we put that sidewalk here now against what people want and then retroacting it? Do we need to say a certain timeline? Would it make better sense saying all new developments are going to require sidewalks on both sides?
I guess that's something that staff can put a little thought into before we have the next conversation on this topic.
I think it would save us some heartburn.
I think that we're okay. You know, this is an ordinance that deals with subdivisions and new subdivisions, but we'll put a little more thought into that, and I'll jot a couple notes, and we'll come better prepared to answer that.
Thank you.
Do you want the word may instead of shall? I mean, is that what you're looking for? That
Well,
change?
I think shall is fine if you're delineating that it's for future development. Where you say shall and don't document the timeline, then people can come back. I mean, this council is well-versed, but for the future council, when there's a roadway project or something and you have to decide, are we going to put it down both sides of the street in an older neighborhood, they're going to point to the ordinance and say, oh.
Yeah.
Jason, would you clarify, though, there is, if it's a replacement, it should be clear that it's at the same width, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So if you're in a neighborhood with 4-foot sidewalk and you're a property owner that does sidewalk replacement, we wouldn't require 5 foot in between a neighborhood of 4. It's match existing there. But this is all of our new reconstructs, we're doing this. Any new development, we're requiring it. And we
Yeah.
want to make sure that the ordinance is pretty clear there.
Absolutely.
We will work in coordination with our city attorney to make sure that your question is satisfied.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Craig?
And I think it's important to recognize what Jason just said, that in new construction, reconstruction, that's where we got into the conversation again, these past projects, is that some of the boulevard doesn't really accept sidewalk on both sides very well. And that's where we as a council have to, I think, just get in and make some common sense decisions. But I think it's been, as long as I've been on council, it's been our decree that as best we can, we're a pedestrian community and we like sidewalks and we push the sidewalk. And I think it's very strong to have the difference between if you're walking, two of you with a pet or something like that, and you're meeting other people, the difference between a 4 and a 5 foot sidewalk is really pretty noticeable. And I appreciate the 5 foot sidewalk. I think it's a good standard to have. I think we've also talked about the safety of young kids riding bikes and having them, the young kids being able to use the sidewalk to learn how to ride a bike and to get acclimated and not put them on the street where the bike rules really require them to be. So I like this. I think it's a good idea. And I think we've always been pretty smart as a council about making decisions where the sidewalk push is applicable, if it's one side or both sides. And I know we'll continue to discuss that because I think our future PI&T meeting is to talk about where sidewalks or come out, where's the common sense on changes and things like that. So we'll continue, I think, to always look at that.
Any other input on this item? If not, the agenda item is the introduction of the ordinance. Is there a motion to that effect?
So move.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Russ, to introduce the ordinance on the, related to walkways and sidewalks. Discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting, and the motion passes. We'll move then to agenda item number 15, consider the approval of the 2021-2022 League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust Property and Casualty and Liability Insurance. So I'll call on Carla Drown, Finance Director, to introduce this item. Carla?
Yes, we're here tonight to renew our insurance coverage for the city for the property and casualty insurance. This insurance covers the city, MMU, and the library, and all three entities do pay their prorated portion. This year, we went through a lot of extensive work going through each property to ensure that all the properties were properly covered for insurance. This took extensive time on city staff and Bremer, our agent who helped us through that. Also, last year at City Council, you gave us direction to obtain other bids for the equipment breakdown coverage, and that has been done, and that is in the packet before you of what we've received. We also went further and attempted to get other bids or quotes for the coverage for private, which all ultimately declined the insurance coverage because the league, they can't beat the league's pricing or premiums. So tonight we have with us Joel Quam, Randy Serene, and Luke Tietz from Bremer, and they will go through further breakdown of what's before you.
Carla, I have a quick question. Did you solicit any more quotes from other agents? Because I think that was one of the requests too, on
No, we did
what they would charge for their commission. Because I know League has a set price, but the commission is flexible. Did you go to other agents to check to see what they would do for that?
No, I did not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so representing the agent of record, Bremer.
Yes. Get my smorgasbord of documents prepared. Okay, well, good evening, council members. First and foremost, thank you for allowing me to come here tonight to speak with you, for allowing Bremer to serve the city, not only currently, but for the collective time frame. We sincerely appreciate the opportunity. And I know insurance is always everyone's favorite topic, right? It's a difficult discussion. And a lot of times because it involves a lot of money, and a lot of times it feels like there's not a lot of control in the insurance program. So you might ask, who am I? Why am I here? Why am I serving the city? And when you look at the history of Bremer, primarily your agent had been Sheldon, and he'd been a longtime agent for Bremer, great individual, and he was your agent of record representing the League of Minnesota Cities and the coverages that you see here before you. As with every organization, there's transition, and there was a retirement, and I know in recent years there were some other changes, but primarily I've been Sheldon. So when we're looking at the city of Marshall, first and foremost, your relationship serving the city, your business is very important to Bremer. So collectively, and this was prior to me coming in, they looked at what is the best way that we can serve the city? What team can we put together to be able to offer you the best service, the best expertise in reviewing your coverages to primarily make sure the city is properly covered, and then also doing so at a competitive price. And so I was asked to come in and serve the city because of my background, and I'll just give you a brief history of that. So I've been in the industry for a little over a decade. I could argue I've been doing it my whole life. My father also served as a commercial insurance advisor for 40 years. So I'm one of the weird ones, I say, that chose to go into insurance. But I, myself, this is the area that I work in. I insure numerous cities through the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trusts. But then also in this space, I'll say governmental, nonprofits, municipalities. I have over 30 clients. And collectively, Bremer and my team that I represent, it's well into the hundreds of this space. So this is what we do. This is what we look for. And that's why coming to it, of working with the city, we wanted to make sure we're doing everything we can to not only maintain the business, but as best we can to keep and continue to earn your business. So when we met with administration and staff, we had a task of going back to the basics. Is what do we need to accomplish? What are some of the areas that I've seen that cities either are deficient in, or we'll see some coverage challenges? And the first, as Carla mentioned, was the property tour. So overall, you're going to see some premium increases, but as a baseline of going back to the league, They're one of the only insurance functions in today's market that essentially took no rate increases this year. Apart from the auto was slight, but property, every other line you see was 0% rate increase. And for reference, in the commercial insurance space, through the second quarter, across all lines commercially, the average rate increase was 15%. So when you look at that, just give some context, and the reasons are clear. I mean, you can't turn on the news without having a drastic storm event, litigation costs increasing. So we're in a hard market environment. So when we went to the property tour, it sounds simple, but it literally is looking at what you have insured on paper, and then physically going around to each space and say, does that match with what we have? If it doesn't, let's flag it, let's address it. So I got in the car and with the help of the city staff, which has been phenomenal to work with, went around to each space and said, here's what we have insured. Is there missing? Is there things that can be deleted? Is there something that's like that you cannot recreate or reconstruct for what it's insured for? So that's what we did in combination, then also look at satellite images to see what's on paper, what we have. And then so collectively, you'll see that in the second line with the property limits. Last year was 218, and then this year's renewal is 230. So that's over $12 million of coverage difference. Half of that, roughly $6 million, was those coverage changes, additions, deletions, increases of coverage that were flagged from the property tour. The remaining portion is from the league making inflationary adjustments on the remaining buildings. So very significant, and arguably that if a claim would have happened in those areas we found, there would have been no coverage. So it's a big goal. It takes a lot of time, but it's very needed. So I like to do that every 3 to 5 years for my cities. The league does it formally about every 7 years, but it had been quite some time. So that's driving the changes. If you take those out, you're looking at a pretty small percentage increase. So that's check mark number one of looking at it. But then also, as Jim, council member, you're saying, right, you want to make sure you're getting value for your dollar, right? And I am an agent, and there's multiple agents to choose from. So why Bremer? Well, in part from what we're doing, in part that we accept what's the rate that's charged by the league, but we want to make sure, to your discretion, that we're doing everything that we can. So part of that is shopping and making sure that we're in a good home. And to give an example of the league and some context, because they're really in a bucket on their own, 98% of all cities in Minnesota are insured with the league. The ones who are not are the big bigs, the Minneapolis, St. Paul's, who essentially self-insure, and there's a program that they're with. And then the small cities that just don't carry insurance. So the remaining cities in Minnesota are all insured through the league. And the reason is it's very hard to collectively insure and put all coverages together to all encompass insure a city. And so is back in the 80s when this was created for League of Minnesota Cities members, and it was created by cities, for cities, and their board of trustees are fellow cities. So that's their sole function. They don't answer to boards, to shareholders. They created the program to insure Minnesota cities. The legal services, the loss control, the facilitation through the independent agencies like that, is all through the league. And if there was another program in which we tested out, you'd see it come in the marketplace, but there's just not, to the degree that most underwriters you ask be like, well, I've seen 1 or 2 Minnesota cities in the last number of years, but it just can't compete with the league coverages and premium wise, because it's a lot of effort for them. So just, and I know I don't want to get too long-winded here to open it up to questions, but just to share some of the responses that we did get from alternative carriers. Travelers Insurance, and one that Carla mentioned, they spent months underwriting your account, applications that we and collectively the city completes. And they tried to get management approval to quote, but ultimately their appetite fell outside of what they're comfortable for because they typically don't insure cities that have a levy system. So they try to get management approval. They could not. But just some highlights. The league does a very good job with Minnesota cities. It's rare that we can compete with them. EMC is another that insures cities across the nation. The league has traditionally been more competitive when it comes to price and coverage. We can also sometimes run into issues when it comes to with buildings and historical landmark significance. I appreciate the request to quote, but if you are ready with the league, that is the best home for the risk. And then a final one of one of the others that we went to is Liberty Mutual. And again, that's the second world's largest insurance company, insures cities across the nation. I've only gone up against the league once or twice. They're quite cheap. We don't get much flow from Minnesota since I understand the league has the majority of the business in the state. So again, it's a different bucket from what we'll say the standard market, but we want to go to the extent to at least vet and to see if there's anyone else who could compete with the league price-wise, but then also coverage and the related services that comes with it. So the recommendation wholeheartedly is that the league is a good source and it should remain the city's primary insurance carrier. And there was a few other lines that we'll talk about. The other item on my agenda when looking at your coverages was the airport liability, right? You have a separate policy for $5 million. The league includes, through the city's program, $3 million of coverage. So the first thought is that needed because cities and governmental entities, state of Minnesota, are subject to a tort statute. You can only be sued for $500,000 for any one person incidents, 1.5 for any one event. So why is there 5 million? And so that's what we validated and vetted. And some history lessons went back to Sheldon, and he said it was many years ago, council had requested a limit above what the league was providing. But when you look at what that policy is, it's just general liability for your airport. Doesn't cover the hangaring operations, doesn't cover anything else associated with the airport. It's just the liability. Well, the league covers that, and the league covers the hangaring portion of your business up to $3 million limit. And so furthermore, we went to the league's attorney, who is the risk management attorney for all the cities. And same thing, he says, unless there was a contractual obligation or requirement to get to that $5 million limit, he did not see the need. And I agree with that. So the recommendation would be to eliminate that coverage because it is, in my opinion, in the opinion of the attorney for the league, adequately covered through the policy. And then the last portion is quoting the equipment breakdown insurance there. And you can see the column right before the Cincinnati option would have been your HSB renewal. And they took a 20% rate increase. And so we extensively shopped and marketed that option. And Cincinnati is, again, a financially rated carrier, one of our carriers that we represent and go to. And it's pretty night and day difference of them being a superior option, same or better coverage, and looking at premium-wise. And then collectively and bringing it back of why the league, you'll see bolded, highlighted, the league being a trust membership program, anything over and above reserved is brought back in the form of dividends. So your most recent dividend was just under $42,000. Last 4 years was $118,000. And since the inception in 1987, you have received roughly $2.6 million of dividends for the league. You just don't see that in the standard market. So this is a high level, a snapshot. We put a lot of time and effort and big thanks and results to administration and staff. So greatly appreciate your partnership, and I open it up to any questions. The other portions of there below of corresponding the above lines, the overall message, again, 0 rate increase with the portion of the auto. So the reasons you see a difference in premium were exposure changes, just more property coverage, your liability rating basis. So it had nothing to do with rate, which again is very positive in a challenged insurance market. So.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Quam. Thanks for your thoroughness on not only your work, but also your presentation. So I'll open it up for questions.
Mr. Mayor?
Craig?
Yeah, on the equipment breakdown, any idea why HSB put in that kind of a rate increase?
Partly hard market. So as a baseline, as I mentioned, across all lines, 15%. So most insurance companies are dealing that they have to take rate because of the amount of losses. And then collectively, and I know there's been a challenge passed with that carrier, and so of a claim not being covered, but there also was claims paid in the last 5 or 6 years, around close to the 200,000 mark. So they looked at claims as well, but partly hard market and partly experience.
Because Cincinnati, when they put their bid in, I mean, they're aware of our claims history also.
They are, yeah.
Correct, and
They
our
also,
exposure.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's fine.
They, yes, they are aware. So we, as part of the process, we paint the best picture historically as we can for our clients, and then we also are very transparent. Loss history is a requirement to quote, and then they also physically went and toured the facility. Very impressed with the city, the facilities, and as it stands, really want to write your business.
Does that cover the utilities also?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Good.
Other questions? If not, you have the recommendation.
Well, I don't have a question, I have some comments on this. It's not really a question.
Go ahead.
I question why we have a 12% increase and we haven't looked at other agencies. I know there's an insurance agent sitting in this room right now who told me he could save us money going through the league. So I find it frustrating that agent was never approached. And I know that the city talked to Joe, but he was never given an opportunity to give this quote. And I know he's sitting right there, Joe. I don't want to pinpoint you for questions, but you yourself have told me you could save us money on the commission rate alone.
Right.
So why are we taking just one agency at the price? You know, as a businessman, I shop insurance every year. It's foolish for us to stand, and Bremer's done a good job, don't get me wrong, but it's foolish for us not to shop this and see if we can't save $20,000, $30,000. You cut a commission by 0.5%, we may save $20,000. And I think not giving Joe an opportunity to do that when they were requested a year ago to do that is very frustrating, and I will not support this because it was not done.
John?
Thank you.
I think we need to differentiate here, and if I'm understanding this correctly, and was dressed to believe in Ways and Means, there's the cost of the insurance is what you're talking about here. Mm-hmm. But is there a separate brokerage, or your brokerage is your
fees? The agent of record fee.
Agent of record fee is in this?
It's in this. So the league pays Bremer, so we don't charge additional fees. We just accept the standard rate that charged by the insurance company.
So really, we're not talking about the particular insurance, I think what you're stating, Jim.
But the
we're
agency
talking about the agent that represents
Correct,
us.
and they could charge less on their fees. And that's what Joe has explained to me for a year. Give him an opportunity, and he could save the city money. And he was never given that opportunity. And it frustrates me that we're not trying to save our taxpayers' money, period.
And if I could address that question as well. So it is the city's option when we do renew with the league. We've always done the 10%. So it's just something that we've always continued with. We didn't have direction at the last council to seek agents. We did go back and review that just to clarify. But the direction that we did receive was to go out on the equipment breakdown side of things to see what we could do. We went one step further with addressing the league. So if that is something that the council would like to give direction, it hasn't been a process that we have dealt with since I've been here over the last 6 years. So I just wanted to clarify that the 10% is something that we elect to the league, and then the league turns around and pays our agent, so.
Is there an amount you'd feel appropriate?
I think it'd be fair to have both you guys bid it. I mean, to me, 0% would be appropriate. But I think it's only fair that Joe has been, I know he's been in contact with you, Sharon, for 8, 9 months on this.
Yeah, well,
So,
I did approach finance staff in the spring about, should we do an RFP? Cities do an RFP for agent of records to see what can be solicited back in terms of the fees. And Joel was new to us, and it was a change, and so we wanted to experience this change, and so we didn't go out for RFP at that point. We wanted to see the work that was done. Finance staff indicated they were very happy with Joel's work, and we also knew that we'd be coming here to council to talk about it. If we were going to look at an agent of record, I would recommend a request for proposals, and it would not just include Joe from North Risk or Bremer. It would be opened up to everybody. And the council could do that. I think we would likely look at doing that, and Joel could maybe help me, but I would think that would be done in the spring, early spring, after the new year is what I would think that the timing of that one, of when that would be done. Am I correct on that?
That's up to your discretion. You usually see it coincide with renewal. So leading up to that, of giving yourself enough time. Because it's really not a decision between insurance companies. It's who you want to represent you. And that's, part of, price is certainly a huge important part, but looking at the time and work, because, theoretically, we could have done nothing and you'd be missing $6 million coverage. But that's a very important point that I feel. I didn't have to go around to any of the tourist, facility, but that's just one of the things I think it's needed. It's necessary.
well, and that brings up my second question. If you found it, how come it's been found for all those years? I mean, maybe looking at a different agent, and I think, Joe, you should have an opportunity to speak here too yet. Could have found that a long time ago if we'd been doing an RFP. So you asked what I mean, yes, I think there should be concession on commission from Bremer this year to start with, but I think we need to do an RFP, and I think we need to get opportunity to other companies to even look at our properties. They could come up with different coverage and save our taxpayers money. So I do think if it'd be all right, Bob, that we should have Joe maybe give a little spiel too.
So if you are going to speak, you need to come up and talk into the microphone and introduce yourself, because we don't know who you are.
Sounds good. Yeah. I can do that. So I don't want to get too far into the weeds too. My name is Joe Larson. I'm with North Risk Partners, a local broker here in Marshall. Used to be Midwest United Insurance. First off, I want to make sure that everyone's aware, I don't want to make this about price, because if we sell on price, we die on price. And if we go to, they're charging 10, we go 8, they come in at 6, next year we're at 4, and nobody's making any money for a lot of work. So I want to make that point, but I think it's important for us to understand, like Jim had mentioned, when has this been done last? How much work has been put into this for the 10%? That was really my point in this process of, all right, do you understand what you're paying your broker through this commission, and what are you getting through that commission? Are you getting value-added services? Are they reviewing property values? Are they doing quarterly claims reviews, those types of things? So I would love an opportunity to sit down and look at this. It kind of just fell by the wayside this year. So that's any questions for me?
North Risk Partners, tell us a little bit about where you're located.
So I'm located right here in Marshall. We have 30 offices across 5 states, about 400 plus employees. Our CEO is Chris Might, originally from Minnesota. I report to the St. Cloud office, but we represent locally here. Established in 2015, 3 different large brokerages, CO Brown, Apollo Division, and Thief River Falls, Toonie Division came together and formed this alliance to create more power and services for their clients that smaller brokers can't do. So now we're competing on regional and national levels with the Marsh McLennans, the Holmes Murphys, the Hayes Groups, the Bremers, those types of folks. So we bring value-added services to our clients beyond the insurance, like HR, safety and loss control, contract review with legal services, those types of things. So
Thank
we're an
you.
independent broker, but bring a lot more to the table than that. Any other questions?
Okay, thank you. Other discussion from the council? The action before us, there's really, as has been discussed here, the action before us is renewal of the insurance coverage. We have a separate discussion about the agent of record.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to say that I appreciate the amount of work that Bremer put in to review the policy. I appreciate the findings of value and that work, and I'll stick up a little bit for the past also, because I felt like, you know, I mean, and again, I'm not insurance smart. I know you can be insurance broke. And, but I thought that when Mr. Kimpling came and did a walkthrough on what we had for coverages and I always felt like we were well represented. You know, I appreciated the work they did. I'm a big believer in competition keeps everybody honest, and I think competition is good. I have absolutely no problem with doing an RFP just to see where things are at. But that said, again, thank you, Bremer, for the work you did. Thank you, as I'm one that had a fairly twisted body part over the boiler insurance and some of the track record that we had with that. So thank you for shopping that out and getting that for us. And with that, I would make a motion that we approve the 21-22 League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust proposal.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Don. Now, discussion on the motion.
Just-
John?
Clarification, does that include the $2,300 for the airport liability? And also, does that include the change to Cincinnati?
Yeah, I guess we should discuss that the airport liability piece. Bob, why did we end up with that? Do you remember?
So that was at a time when the airport runway was expanded to 7,100 feet. And there was concern from the users that there could be additional claims that would go back on them, recognizing that the city has their coverage, but there's very large, expensive planes that can use that. We even saw that over the past 2 weeks with a experimental airliner that was testing here or not. But that said, if the league's insurance trust attorney and risk management expert says that's not an issue, it's not an issue in my mind.
And a good question on this. So, and for all the insurance experts in here, I know that I was surprised to hear that the tort limit is 1.5 because I'd understood it to be 2 million under state. Because I know when the I-35 bridge collapsed, that would have paid $1.5 million total at that time. So then the legislature goes in and does the I-35 bridge fund in order to pay victims of the I-35 bridge. You also said there's a $500,000 individual incident, correct? So what if one of our large aircraft lands and there's 10 people on board and all 10 are dead? Is that 5 million then? Is it 10 times 500,000 or is it the 1.5 million?
500 per 1.5 total.
Okay, so our limits, legal tort limits is 1.5 million no matter what piles in there.
Yeah, so it's.
Joel?
Yep, we'll have to use the microphone.
So it's a Minnesota tort statute, so anything within Minnesota falls. If it gets into federal, all bets are off. Or if something, say, across state lines and you get sued in a different state.
Right.
So just the state of Minnesota.
And that's only for government entities, correct? That doesn't apply to the private sector. It's only for
Not private.
government?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, so the league sets their limits to coincide with those tort statutes.
So the $2,300 that we're paying, that's for the additional.
This is a side policy away from the league for additional $5 million of just, it actually has nothing to do with anything with the planes. It's you owning the space to generalize the slip and falls, the classic example, somebody out there. So it's And it doesn't even cover hangering of the planes. That's only through the league. So it did seem redundant.
Okay.
And I think we put that in place. The FBO is required to have a $5 million.
And that was the thing, if
liability.
there was a contractual obligation, but it didn't appear that that was the case anymore, or maybe it was at some.
So the FBO has their own,
Correct. They have their own
Umbrella.
$5 million general liability policy as part of that operation out there.
so we're insuring the insured. I guess I would amend my motion to omit or to cancel the $5 million liability umbrella, and then also to accept the quote for the boiler. Yeah, the Cincinnati insurance.
Okay. And that's consistent with your second?
Yeah.
Okay. And it's also consistent with the recommendation, so good. Any other discussion on the motion?
I agree with Craig that we should do an RFP for this next year. You know, I think that should be the consensus. I agree with that. That's true of us on the council. I hope we get a consensus on that.
Other discussion on the motion?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think an RFP is appropriate every few years, if not every year, to, again, in the effort to get the best deal for the taxpayers. But if we're just paying for insurance, I think this is a great idea, and I really appreciate the hard work that went in saving us money.
Yep.
Can we add that to the motion too, Craig? To have an RFP done for next year?
I don't know, is that appropriate for this?
I think that ought to be a separate action.
Separate motion.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do it as a separate.
Any other discussion on this motion? Which is simply for the renewal as described. If not, we'll move to a vote. And we'll close the voting. And the motion does pass.
I would make the motion that we make sure we do an RFP for the insurance next year, if that'd be appropriate to do that at that time, Bob, at this time.
For the agent of record. Is there
I would second that.
motion by Jim, seconded by Steve? Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting. And that motion also passes. Thank you. We'll move then to agenda item number 16. This will be the pre-development agreement on Block 11. I'll turn to Sharon Hanson, City Administrator. Sharon?
Yes, the city staff have brought forward to council previously a pre-development agreement. And the previous agreement was with a firm out of Mankato, APX, we called them Apex, and they had plans for development on Block 11. We have a new interest from a different developer, also out of Mankato. And they have proposed some residential apartments, and you see that listed in the development agreement, but also a mix of commercial and residential. They propose initially when they talked to our staff, it was a three-phased. They originally proposed starting with residential and seeing how that goes, and then working into a commercial residential mix. So we like the pre-development agreement. It worked fairly well with APX, even though that didn't come fully through, although they have since expressed interest as well again. But it gives the city some assurance on moving forward with a potential development and some timelines. And as you see, the agreement ends 12/31 of this year. And for the developer, it means that we are not taking any other interest at this time. We're going to be solely working with them. So it was a request for them to solidify the discussions. So we have a lot more work to do. We need to actually get some more detail financially and actually on their proposed development. And then, of course, kind of see what kind of financial assistance we want to look at. We've talked to them about tax increment financing. We've also talked about tax abatement. There may be a desire to do tax abatement over tax increment financing because the requirements of TIF may not lend well to their project in particular. This development group has done development in Le Sueur, Redwood Falls, St. Peter. I think I'm missing some communities, but and Mankato, of course, but some other communities that aren't as large as Mankato and have proved successful. So again, we'd like to just solidify this discussion that we've had with them. We're relying on Baker Tilly for advice on the financing, and we did have Kennedy and Graven draft the pre-development agreement, which is nearly identical to the previous one, just some small modifications. And I believe the city attorney did review a draft of this. If he needs to review the final one that's here, that's fine too. But we are requesting approval of this pre-development agreement.
Okay. Thank you, Sharon. Questions? John?
Just on the, just want to understand it right, as far as the city costs, if we have out-of-pocket costs that we are incurred, is it a maximum of $750? Is that what they're going to reimburse us, or what?
And Nanette, correct me, my understanding is we actually are charging them a kind of a application fee of $750. And if there are costs incurred, they would pay for them. However, it kind of depends on what those costs are. I know that we did do previously some soil boring work, and we did pay for them so that we were able to keep that information, and that was when Apex was on it. They didn't own the information then, so we still do have that information. But they would pay for those costs.
Okay, so we basically get $750 for the getting into this agreement. Okay.
Any other questions? I think it's encouraging that there's a proposed project there, and this is a necessary first step to be sure that it's a feasible project, both for the developer and the city. Any other questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
I move approval.
A second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting. And the motion, Don, did you vote?
Wow, I thought I had.
I thought you made a motion on it. Now you're not going to vote?
All right.
And the motion does pass, unanimous. Okay, thanks, Don. We will then move to the next agenda item number 17 is Commission Board Liaison Reports. Actually, mine have not met since our last meeting. Jim?
Oh, that's a change of pace.
We'll start on your end this time.
Curveball.
It was. City Hall Committee met, and we have issued, or substantial completion of the building has been issued. Most of the issues that are left to finish have gotten to a very small list. So it's coming along very well. I think another month and a half, we'll be hopefully closing out this project and have a complete City Hall. Other than that, mine did not meet, because I was caught off guard to think of anything there, Bob.
Jeez.
And Russ.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only one that met on my half was CVB. They're looking at starting a seasonal newsletter for the individuals, also looking at creating a new website, a Red Baron website, to replace Marsh. Marsh is going to be no longer existing, and possibly looking at some city financial help for that website, so, because it is a city-owned building. They're looking at moving in first part of, or actually the end of this week, so that's finished up with Dasher sale, and they sold a few more than last year's, and they'll be able to have the final numbers next month. And that's about it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And John.
EDA did meet. One of the actions we took care of tonight in moving, change run of a home into the Parkway addition. So that was some of the action they took. MMU also had a meeting. It was actually on the scale of relatively short, taking over of new chairship and things like that. So DEA, diversity, equity, and inclusion, also had a chance to get a number of people together physically. So it was good just to meet up with people that you'd see in a little square otherwise on your computer screen. So thanks to city and city staff for putting that together. So that's about it.
Okay. And Don.
The Planning Commission met last week in a special meeting to go over the, I think it's the replatting, moving lines at the Mosh property. That did move forward, so I think that'll be coming up to the next meeting. And then we also had a short discussion about membership for the committee, Planning Commission, I should say, and trying to just work among the people that were there that night on talking to people about interest in not only in the Planning Commission, but other commissions that are short here in the city of Marshall. So we've made a few outreaching from members of the committee. So we're working on that too.
And Steve.
So Councilmember DeCramer gave the update on EDA. My community services did not meet. Cable Commission did meet. We had Alex Peterson give us a great update basically on Studio One, and it's really amazing what we've done for Studio One. Just some facts, there's been 1,043 shows during 2020. This is over the past 18 months. We had over 129,000 hits across our 3 digital platforms. Studio One completed central production project, allowing them to pull feeds from all around town on fiber optics to be able to direct and provide replay at the Red Baron Arena. This has reduced setup and teardown time by Alex and his staff by about 70%. We're blessed, one of very few communities in the state, to be able to use MMU's fiber optics through a partnership agreement. This allows us significantly increased ability for production and setup and broadcast locations. We installed AV equipment at Merritt Center for during COVID when we had to meet there, including 3 cameras and 8 wireless mics that allowed us all to participate. They installed Wi-Fi and web conferencing at the Adult Community Center, and they also installed, Alex and his people installed 51 security cameras throughout the town so we can protect our properties against the vandalism that we'd experienced. Marshall High School and Studio One work installed a signal that allows Marshall High School to provide their live feeds through the school's no video board at the South Gym. We purchased a cable cast reflect, and this is the start of expenditures, to increase the number of viewers able to watch Studio One. Beforehand, it was limited. So if we broadcast SMSU's graduation and we had hundreds of people, there'd be quite a significant amount of people that get blocked out because they'd hit their limit and they'd be unsatisfied. They bought a procedure, bought the license to allow that to go unlimited, and then the system crashed and they figured that. So Alex and his astuteness worked with that provider and tested it now so that now we know we have unlimited. So that really enhances things. We have so much technology that we can upload feeds and download feeds from all across the state and other places to get things here, which really benefits teams from other communities when they can't come here. If they want to watch a hockey game, for instance, they can watch from the cities or wherever, live feed on our system, which is really, really impressive. Some other expenditures, they got a TriCaster and 3 cameras for this council chambers, the 8 mics and the new system for live remote broadcasts. So we're as good almost as some of the big cities stations. So a big kudo to Alex and his team. And it's impressive that little town of Marshall had over almost 130,000 hits across 3 platforms. That's impressive. So that's our report.
Thank you for that report, Steve. Craig?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Merritt Center meeting was September 16th. I was not able to attend, but the update on it is there was customized training provided by Minnesota West in July and August, including pilot car course, commercial vehicle inspection course, EVOC, emergency vehicle operations, motorcycle safety course. They did 2 of those, a moped course, and then the ongoing CDL, commercial driver training. Marshall, the fire department actually did their EVOC training themselves out on the track on July 20th. July 21st, North Memorial conducted the helicopter air zone landing training with local fire departments. There was 28 people attending that. The CALS training, Comprehensive Advanced Life Support, returned to the Merit Center on the 18th and through the 20th of August for their 5th offering of that class. There were 29 healthcare workers that attended. They'll return to the Merit again in November. So that's getting a lot of the healthcare and Avera stuff. Avera held their monthly leadership meeting again in August on the 17th with 40 to 55 people attending those meetings. And then the Mankato Police Department's been coming over too and using our track, and they did their PIT driver course at the Merit Center August 23rd for 21 officers. We should probably figure out how to sell that kind of on a live feed, Alex. That'd be probably pretty entertaining watching those guys learn how to dump. So that's, I mean, we learned how to do it on the racetrack, but you know, it's a little different on the street. Things are continuing to go on. Alex worked with also helping there, doing some security camera install just to keep an eye on things. The Merit Center Facebook went up from 21 to 500 likes, so we're getting a lot of traction now on Facebook out there, which is really awesome. And actually, Jasmine and Chief Jim Marshall worked on filing for a fire service seminar grant, and that was, we were awarded $2,000 for chief and captain training, and it's done by a gentleman that comes up from Texas. And this was really pretty highly sought after training, and we were awarded a $2,000 grant to support that for a March event, which is great. Also put in a 2022 legislative bond request, so we're getting support from Senator Dams and Representative Swedinsky for that. Some more public safety health courses. There's 3 modules coming up soon, and then a lot of courses again just for the driving track for EVOC and CDL. So just the kind of the numbers report. July and August, there was 43 out of the 62 days that either the classroom and or track were used. Attendees in July, 364, August 205, for a total of 569 students in 2 months through the Merit Center, students and visitors. So again, it's getting a lot of use, good compliments, and things are moving well. So that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Craig.
Yep.
Move then to council member individual items. Jim, we're going to start at your end again.
I just have one thing, and I think a few of us got this call, but I got a call from the neighborhood on Viking Drive about VRBOs. And they asked, well, what ordinances the city of Marshall have? As far as I know, we don't really have any ordinances on VRBOs right now. You know, I understand their plight because it's a large house that's being rented to, they claim a large group of people. I think the neighbors are sitting back there, actually. I think it's something we as a city need to take a look at, but it's also something that we need to do the ordinance correctly so we can also embrace VRBOs because, I know Craig says all the time to get large conventions here, we need more rooms and that can be taken up by VRBO. It's a balancing act. I know Sharon and I talked about it today because I know the city of Duluth has some type of ordinance on it, license. And I know I have a property in another area that we actually are licensed and then rent it through VRBO. So there's a way to do this responsibly. I think we take the knowledge from our other communities, put it together and see if we can't come up with a responsible ordinance that also captures the hotel revenue that we would be losing off of hotels. Because I know my property, they actually capture the hotel revenue off of. As part of their ordinance that has to be paid. So I think the neighbors have a good point, and I think we need to, as a city, not to pile more on top of our staff, Ilya and Jason. I think it's something we do need to start working on because they may become more popular, maybe they never will. I don't know. Hopefully in Marshall we get more of them, but I think it's something that we need to take a look at and address and see if we can't do the ordinance right. And if the first ordinance doesn't work, we can always change it. But I do think we need to address their concerns of having houses rented to 12 people. I think that's too many.
Well, and I agree with you, Jim. And, there's a couple factors. One is regulation should address the residential area in terms of number of people, in terms of cars on the street or parking, but then also the other enforcement that the city does have in place in terms of noise and things like that. So there are examples in other communities that we can look at, and I agree with you that this needs to be done properly, but we also need to have some sense of urgency on it because it's already started, so it will continue, so.
Other than that, I have been very busy with other stuff, so I have nothing else.
Okay, Russ?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just echo what Jim says, and I would also like to see if we have time to listen to the residents tonight, if they would, at the meeting. So that's all.
John?
Really have nothing more to add on that subject. We had some, in lieu of our L&O meeting, we had some discussion on it. So I think we do get to that point. Jason Anderson's got some input that he wants to put in, as well as everyone else that talked about it, because there are cities out there that are doing it, and there's a wide variety of ordinances, so we need to review those.
Craig?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, and I agree. I appreciate the call. I also had a conversation with one of the property owners in the neighborhood, and I think it's like you say, it's twofold. One is the whole portion of the business of rental, and then the other part is just proper behavior. And this, to me, ties into our conversation about rental ordinances also, the difference between being a vested owner in a property and just someone that's either there for a day or just short term, and kind of how those behaviors match. And the other good news is that the acute problems can be handled like through a nuisance ordinance and that type of thing, where if it's bad behavior by one group of people for one night, that's, we already have ordinance and remedy in place for that by simply calling the PD and asking for someone to come and report to that too, and you hate to be a neighbor to complain about a neighbor, but then you shouldn't be a neighbor that causes complaints either. So it's a two-way street, and I tell people not to feel too guilty about reporting when someone else is exhibiting bad behavior, because being a good neighbor is playing on both sides of the fence, so.
Okay, anything else, Craig?
Nope.
Steve?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with everybody here. In a way, it's a good problem to have. I would have never thought that we had a VRBO in Marshall. I'm glad we have progressed enough to start having it, but ideally, we would have had ordinances in place before it becomes a problem, and maybe that's the strategic planning that we need to do as a council instead of being reactionary. But I think we have to act on this now because the concerns are valid. So I agree with everything everybody said. We need to figure out a way to get this and capture the revenue, put the right rules in place, and just go forward.
And Don?
I guess I'll just add my 2 cents. This is the first I've heard about it. Maybe if Councilman Luginski would share that before the meeting, then I could form an opinion on what you're talking about.
I'd like to surprise you, Don.
We're all about surprises tonight.
Right.
Anything else, Don?
No.
So 2 things, and then I'll come back to the VRBO discussion. First off, and Jason, maybe you're going to address some of this later, but the Corps of Engineers flood control repair. Several years ago, we know that there was a near breach of the levee from the storm events, and that now has been repaired very nicely. And in fact, the restoration of the trail on top of the levee was completed, I believe, yesterday or today, and they're doing the seeding and the turf work today. So that's, while it's dry now, it does get wet. So so that's a very good protection that we have from the city, and it was completed very timely by the Corps of Engineers and their subcontractor. Sharon and I were both in attendance at the opening session of the Marshall Leadership Academy. One of the things, and this kind of comes back to a comment, Don, you made earlier about the need for additional people to step forward and take leadership positions in various boards and commissions and become involved in the community. And we made that request to that group as a group of potentially emerging leaders that are likely reflective of the community in terms of gender, in terms of age, and in terms of ethnicity, which, in fact, even our council is not reflective of the community in terms of gender or age or ethnicity. So hopefully we can continue to encourage that, because we do have important work that's done on our boards and commissions, and we do have numerous vacancies on our boards and commissions. And then one other item before I get to the VRBO, and I know I said two. I think one of the things, we have a number of pending litigations that are out there, and most notably the Broadmoor Valley issues. And so I believe it would be appropriate, and I'd like to request consideration that at our next regular council meeting that we schedule a closed session for the purposes of discussing pending litigations. And then finally, the continued discussion of the issue that has been brought up relating to the VRBO. And we have a fairly short agenda tonight, and I know this is not on the agenda this evening, but there's people in attendance that are here for that specific issue. So Rick or Michelle, or if any of you wish to speak, you have the opportunity now if you want to. So.
Thank you, Mayor Burns. I'm Michelle Schaefer, and a couple of my husband's here and one of our neighbors, and we had a couple neighbors who couldn't be here, and a couple who are not comfortable saying something publicly because we are neighbors. I just want to say that this really, our concerns about the VRBO and the rental that's going on next door to us really isn't about our neighbors, so I just want to make that point. This truly is about, we live in a single-family residential neighborhood. We've all invested in our homes. We have the right to quiet enjoyment of our homes. There was never any discussion talking about a good neighbor policy. Our neighbors did not talk to any of us. None of us had a heads up. We woke up on a Saturday morning and had multiple cars next door, large group of people, and we were like, what's going on? Our neighbors must have family over, whatever. Start to do our yard work. Our neighbors are nowhere to be found. Is someone squatting? Like, what is going on? Would have never thought of that, but that happened in my daughter's neighborhood a month ago. So that's where my mind went. My neighbors have been back and forth between out of town and in town. So do I call the cops? What do we do? What's going on? I would have been extremely embarrassed to have called the cops and had them come over and talk to these people that were renting. And rightfully so, they apparently had an agreement with the neighbors. Those are the kind of things that need to be addressed. We have a right to have a comment, to say if we're comfortable with this in our neighborhood. Years ago, when we built our house, I had a home-based business. And in order to do that, I had to go through and get a conditional use permit. Neighbors within, as you know, a certain radius of my home all had to be contacted, all had an opportunity to weigh in on that, and had too many of them had a negative idea about it, I would not have received that conditional use permit from the council. That is not something that's happened here. I would say from a safety standpoint, and that's really our issue, is it's the enjoyment of our homes and it's the safety issue. We've never had an opportunity to weigh in on that. If there is no regulation, no licensing, no conditional use permit, if there are issues, what's the city's recourse to stop this rental from taking place, whether it's in our neighborhood or somewhere else? We bought in a single-family residential neighborhood. We built, we've committed, we've invested there. I want to be able to be out in my neighborhood. None of our yards are fenced. We all overlook each other's yards. They're in a cul-de-sac, multiple homes behind them, back up to them, and a couple of us to the, one on each side of them. But the backyard affects, I should have counted, probably 5 or 7 homes. We were not home this last weekend. We were home the first weekend. There was no issue with the renters. Our understanding when we got home Sunday night is there were some issues this weekend. Cops probably maybe should have been called. They weren't. We were trying to be, it sounds like I asked why they didn't. They were uncomfortable. They didn't want to be, they just didn't want to do that. I would say that if it happens again, the cops will be called. And I can't personally speak to that, because if I say to it, then I'm talking about gossip that I didn't have firsthand knowledge of. But my point is these are not fenced yards. When we've done VRBO, we've done them, our rentals, we've done them out of town when we've gone. We've done 1 or 2 of them. You know, they've had fenced-in backyards. They're very private. We don't even see, no one sees us. They don't see us, you know, whatever. It's just, there's no interaction. So one of my neighbors, one of their concerns is they have a teenage daughter. She's in activities, fall activities, marching band, volleyball, any of that type of stuff. Our students are out of town. They get home late at night from these volleyball tournaments, marching band. If the parents are not home and these kids come home, they're no longer comfortable now letting their kids be home overnight by themselves, because we no longer know who's renting in our neighborhood. We don't know what's going on. And after this last weekend, they're uncomfortable about it. And that was the thing that they wanted me to reiterate. This isn't about our neighbors. This is about a safety thing. And from this mom, it's just like, I am no longer comfortable being able to enjoy our home. And now I feel like I have to regulate our kids being home or how we utilize our home. So I guess that's what I want to say is 2 weekends availability, 2 weekends it's been rented, like you, Dr. Meister. I would not have guessed that. The first weekend, I was like, okay. Second weekend, I was like, I'm shocked that it's been available 2 weekends, and it's been full 2 weekends. So this is not a problem that's going to go away. They're going to continue to rent. I was told that they will continue to rent their home until they leave town. So it's going to continue to go on. So I would urge you sooner rather than later to start these discussions. It's just a gap that has fallen through the cracks. It hasn't been something that we've had before. I don't think any of us really kind of thought too much about it. But when it comes next door to you, you definitely start thinking about it, because now I'm on the other side of it and I realize how it affects. And so we need to have some sort of regulation. I don't know how many times you can rent out a home before it becomes a business. If you're making money on it, to me, it's a business. So at minimum, something needs to be into the city. The city needs to be aware of where the rentals are taking place and whatever rules you want to put in place with it. But again, we have the right to enjoy our homes. And that has to come first before someone's right to rent out their home, is from our standpoint.
Thank you, Michelle.
Yep.
And
Thank
thanks
you.
for providing that additional detail. I think you also heard the direction of the council, that the council is provided the direction that this needs to be addressed by first at the staff and then the committee level, and as you know, with some expediency on action, since it is a current concern. Sharon, do you have anything you wanted to add there?
We did briefly discuss it today at Legislative and Ordinance. We didn't have a full committee presence because of other conflicts, but we'll be taking a look at any comparable communities and other communities as well, large or small. Some of the larger communities have maybe had more experience. They too have experienced resident concerns even after adopting ordinance and licensing provisions. So we kind of want to be fully aware of kind of what some of the pitfalls are, even if we put something on paper. But I believe the chairman of the committee, John DeCramer, stated that we do want to have it come back to the committee and flush it out there, and we'll have Attorney Simpson there as well.
Okay. Thank you, Sharon. We'll move then to staff reports. So once again, Sharon.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Council, I know that in my weekly updates, I've mentioned quite a few times just discussing the community survey on parks and recreation. And we are now have finalized the questions. We're going to have 33 questions, and this is, you know, just a reminder again, this is the telephone survey that we contracted with Baker Tilly. We are going to do a press release, which is going to be issued tomorrow, and we're going to tell people what the caller ID will say. We will provide the phone number that will be seen on caller ID. I know that was a concern about whether or not you'll pick up your phone, and it still may be some reluctance out there just because of all the other telemarketing calls that are currently in existence. But we're hoping to really promote it, and we're going to try to reach 300 people. It's going to be statistically viable. And we think we captured some good questions in there, and if we didn't, we have a couple open-ended questions. You know, what did we miss? What do you think that should have been included? So it gives the respondent a chance to really kind of share what they think. We do have a couple questions on financing. We directly talk about support for sales tax as one of the questions, and then also property tax increases, and whether or not there would be support for different levels or no level at all. We do ask that as well. So again, just we're putting some investment into this because when we go in the direction of sales tax or any bonding, we don't want to waste staff time, which means wasting tax dollars too. So it'll give us a good future footprint on recreation and park facilities that we need to look at. We do know that people's spare time is being spent differently. We've seen some decline in some of our recreation, softball leagues, for example, and we know privately there's some of our volleyball leagues have been run not so much by the city anymore. We're seeing higher interest in pickleball, more so than tennis. And just kind of what does that future look like, and getting that feedback from the community, I think, will be really, really important. I know the mayor has mentioned having a park and recreation master plan, which I think would be really good for the city too, and almost would have been good to kind of have that prior to this survey, but maybe this will kind of help lend well into looking into that as a next step as well. So anyway, I will provide the press release just so you're not blindsided on that, and that's going to happen the first 2 weeks in October, hopefully. So that's my report, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. Jason?
Thank you, Mayor. As you touched on earlier, the Corps of Engineers project is largely complete and it looks fantastic. So we're really pleased with how that came together. While that was a project that was primed by a contractor out in Illinois, it was subcontracted locally to D&G for a lot of the works, and they did a really good job. So that looks nice. And if you're out looking at those spots and those repairs, there's another one nearer to the landowner's shop that the street department repaired. You may remember that the council elected to turn down 2 alternative locations for repair due to pricing of that contract. The street department has made those repairs since that time very recently, and they both look equally as nice, I think. So I think those turned out really great, and probably a little higher level of work than we were even sort of selling to the council, where we just said we'd dump some rock in. But those turned out nice. Independence Park project is underway. You've noticed the work going on out there, I'm sure. They're kind of working in the ballpark area with hopes of getting that all removed and replaced yet this fall. I don't know that we'll have too high of expectations for much more work than that this fall, but that ballpark area we hope to get tidied up. Westwood neighborhood curb replacement, that's been going on, so you can drive through there and see some of that work that's been done or being done. We received notice from the state aeronautics office recently that the city will likely be awarded grant funds for 4 different projects at the airport. So that's exciting, and also comes with an obligation from the city, because then we need to locally match those grant funds. So we'll have more conversations with the council going forward when we get those grant agreements. But the projects are for some airport zoning, some seal coat work, some pavement replacement, and the Helena Chemical building acquisition. So we'll continue to work with our city attorney on that and try to get that done now that the money is being handed before us here. So that's really, really good. A lot of dollars worth of projects there, and more to come. Dean Kudrin's working on getting some quotes for the AD roof repair at the airport. We've got a leaking roof out there, so that's an unbudgeted expense that we'll have to account for. We'll come back to the council, hopefully at the next meeting, with some quotes to evaluate for a roof repair over the AD building. We've got a bid opening next week on October 5th that will hopefully come forward on the 12th with snow removal quotes for Merit Center and the liquor store. We've got the Independence Pond 4-bay expansion project that partners with the trail project going on now, coming on October 6th. We'll be opening bids. And on October 7th, I'll be serving on a selection committee with MnDOT personnel for selection of a consultant for the College Drive reconstruction project. So that's exciting. They've got some proposals that we'll evaluate, and we'll work with to determine who the next partner is going to be as we go forward with that project. I think that's all I've got.
Okay. Any questions for Jason?
Mr. Mayor, Jason, you want to give an update on Country Club Drive? I've been asked about that. Are we going to wait to chip seal that next year, or what's the status?
Sure. Yeah, we had a lot of good meetings this week, actually, with a handful of contractors related to some different performance items, and that was one of them, where we sat down with Dunick this week, early in the week, with our engineering staff, and discussed issues that still need to be resolved and how we're going to potentially resolve them a little further. There was discussion of a couple more patching locations that have to occur, and then do we come through and do some sort of smoothing grind and maybe a seal on top of that, or how do we work to resolve this? We've also sent some pavement samples up to MnDOT for evaluation. So we're just sort of working through this with the contractor, trying to work with them, not against them, but also understanding that the end result wasn't how either party wanted it. So
And maybe it's just me, but have more spots opened up, and it seems they've been repaired in the last couple of weeks than before?
There's a couple spots on Lion Street for sure that will get patched. Predominantly Country Club was where it was,
Country
that was
Club,
where it was bad.
that's what I hear about is Country Club Drive, the numerous patch spots.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So we're still working with the contractor. We have to understand that there are limitations. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars of pavement on the ground, and doing it over is not an option. We just need to figure out why it happened, make sure it doesn't happen again, and make sure that the city gets some sort of product that we feel good about that will last us the 15 to 20 years that we want it to.
So it's not an option to mill and overlay it again, it's just there's other...
I don't think that that's a fair option, or
Okay,
maybe even a
okay.
defensible position.
All right, thank you.
Okay. And Dennis?
Well, Jason set me up for the Helena response, as promised for you, Mr. Labatt. Trying to arrange a phone conference with MnDOT, not MnDOT, Department of Ag folks. They're still working from home, but the contact person did get back to me with a summary indicating that the environmental consultant for Helena has submitted a cleanup plan. That is being reviewed by the Department of Ag folks, and they will comment on that. We should have a response within the next 2 weeks regarding their comments to the cleanup plan. Cleanup plan includes the removal of 1,400 cubic yards of contaminated soils, and I don't understand it from there. It can either be land filled or land applied. It's my understanding of land application, then the stuff evaporates away.
It's at agronomic rate because it's ag chemical. It's just that it's too concentrated in that area, so it would be like applying in exceedance of the label. So you can take whatever the primary constituent is, and as long as you land apply it at agronomic rate, then it's a beneficial reuse. Otherwise, it goes to the landfill where it's captured and recycled.
Right, and I think that's part of the comment, but 1,400 cubic yards, that's a lot.
That's not a lot for a dig out, though. Actually,
No,
that's
really?
for a site cleanup,
Really
that's
isn't.
actually pretty
Okay.
minimal.
And I think that may be, what we're waiting to hear, but we should have that response within 2 weeks. But we also know now there's a timeline on the state grant to purchase that. We must finalize the transaction by July 1 or July 31? July 1 of 2022. So we've got a window of opportunity here for about 9 months to finalize that transaction.
So the pending action, or who needs to make the next approval, is Minnesota Department of Agriculture. It's not Helena, it's not the city, it's MDA.
Correct. And our purchase agreement is subject to the Department of Agriculture kind of giving us the clean slate, that it is now, the soil corrections has been completed and it's okay to now transfer the property. So-
If it appears that we're not getting a timely response, I would be more than happy to have a conversation with Commissioner Tom Peterson, who's the Commissioner of Agriculture in Minnesota. I know him personally, and I think he'd be responsive, and he wants to see this happen too.
Right. Well, we hope not to have to go to that route.
But I don't want to be another 2 weeks and hear the same thing we heard from a month ago.
Right. It's a timeline on that for
Okay.
2 weeks, and that was as of last Wednesday. So hopefully by next Wednesday, we'll have a response. And also, Mr. Labatt, we are on our third draft of the MAHA agreement this week. The final comments came in today, and we should be resolving that matter as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Dennis? If not, the remaining items on the agenda are before you, which include the information items, including the building permits and the listing of upcoming meetings. Is there any other item to come forward this evening?
Move we approve, or move we adjourn. Move we approve to adjourn.
Motion by Craig, and we'll restate that for the minutes so it's worded properly, and seconded by Jim. Discussion on that motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting. And the motion does pass. We are adjourned.
And Mayor, I've made a note.